Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Inside Inter Miami. As you see, Andre usually does the introduction, but Andre Fernandez is on vacation. So today I will be running the show, and I have a very special guest with us who's been on the show before. He's a terrific guest, knows so much about the international game and MLS and the business of soccer, which we're going to talk about with him later. Simon Evans. Welcome to Simon. Simon, there he is. Simon is the U.S. Sports correspondent for AFP, Agence France Presse. He also has a newsletter and podcast called The Soccer Business, which I'm going to have him talk about later because it's really interesting. He's sort of carved a little niche in the soccer coverage. He doesn't just cover games; he's covering the business of soccer, and so he's had some interesting guests and interesting perspectives on that. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me. Yeah, great to be here.
Sure, absolutely. Why don't you tell real quick, give us a quick introduction about what you're doing right now. In addition to covering games and Club World Cup for AFP, tell us about this other project.
Yeah, so the Soccer Business is a weekly newsletter, comes out every Friday, which covers all the business news, all the soccer industry news at every level, really. So it's MLS, it's NWSL, it's USL, a lot going on in the lower leagues of soccer at the moment. It's international things like the Club World Cup, like Leagues Cup, the CONCACAF situations, and so it's a wide-ranging newsletter, and then we do a podcast every week as well with various guests from that world of soccer business.
What led you to, did you think that there was a need for that? There was kind of a hole, do you think? What led you to do it?
Yeah, so I did because I used to get a lot of news over my desk that was, if it was about, for example, a USL club or a relatively minor bit of business around MLS, and I'd find it really interesting, and I knew other people who would find it interesting, but it wasn't big enough to be a story for an international news agency. So nothing ever really came of that kind of information. I just built up that knowledge and those contacts, but really had nowhere to go with it. So that led me to think that, maybe I could make use of that, started posting things about the soccer business on LinkedIn and got a great reaction from people, started the newsletter. It's done really well. And then the podcast allows us to go into a little bit more depth. So in this week's podcast, for example, we have Oleg Lowenstein, who's the head of global sport for Televisa Univision, huge broadcaster of soccer in the Spanish language. And, we had a good 40 minutes talking about that whole situation and about the Spanish language marketing for soccer in general. So it's a mixture of news in the newsletter, keeping you up to date, what's going on, who's building a new stadium, who's done a new sponsorship deal, and then the podcast to sort of go into the issues and the themes around the business of the sport as it grows in this country.
That's very cool. Yeah. So I would say everyone should subscribe, listen to his podcast in addition to Inside Inter Miami, definitely business of soccer. So in this week's episode, there's a lot to unpack. We have they're not even rumors anymore. They are very substantiated reports that Rodrigo De Paul is talking with Inter Miami ownership about joining his very close friend Lionel Messi at Inter Miami. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Messi's contract extension situation. What is the latest with that? Those two, I believe, are probably linked. And then speaking of Messi, the game that he just had at Montreal, there was some question, is he going to play? Is he going to rest? Not only did he play, he played with a lot of passion, had a great game. So we're going to review what happened in Montreal, what comes next. They have a very, very busy schedule over the next few weeks, a very, very busy schedule, really over the next month. And then we're going to shift gears and go back to the Club World Cup, which is still going on, even though Inter Miami's not in it anymore, but it is still very much going on with semifinals and the final coming up. So this weekend. I talked to Simon too, from a global perspective, what's been the reaction and the impression of this tournament in general. So we have a lot to talk about. I want to start with Rodrigo De Paul. This has been really gaining steam over the last 4 or 5 days, and I did get confirmation from a very good source that Jorge Mas was in Madrid over the weekend talking to Rodrigo and his people about luring him away from Atletico Madrid. He has one more year on his contract there, but he is other than Luis Suarez, he's one of Messi's very, very closest friends. They are inseparable on the Argentine national team. Wherever you see one, you see the other. Just like how you see Messi with Suarez all the time with Inter Miami, you always see him with De Paul when he's with the Argentine national team. He plays in the midfield. He's kind of a sort of an enforcer bodyguard for Messi. So it sort of makes sense that he would come over as they're leading into the World Cup. So they would be working together as Argentine teammates in all of the months leading up to the World Cup. Also, let's be honest, we don't know Luis Suarez's future on the team. He's had a bit of a dip this year. He has not re-signed, and Sergio Busquets has also not re-signed. So if one or both of those don't re-sign, it would make sense, I think, to bring in someone like Rodrigo De Paul. What do you think, Simon, about this particular rumor report?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting as you're reporting there about Jorge Mas going to Madrid. That adds a seriousness and a credibility to this whole situation and stories, because there's so many, trade stories, transfer stories around soccer that you never quite know what's true and what isn't.
What's real and what's not. Yeah.
But, this one sounds real now in the context of what you just told us. And look, he's one of the best midfielders in the world. And he's not 38 years of age. He's 31.
Right.
Yeah?
He's 31. He's 31. So he's got he could have 5 more years, and they want to have a strong team going into this new stadium. They want to have a strong team the rest of this year. Obviously, they want to compete for MLS Cup. They also want to have a strong team when they open the new stadium, Miami Freedom Park. And tell me if you agree. I would not be surprised if, these Messi contract talks have been dragging on and on. And I do think probably, I'm not saying that he's holding this over their head, but he may be saying, look, I need some reinforcements on this team. We need some more quality on this team. And this would be a great addition to the team. I mean, I think that these two negotiations could be going on hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's some logic to that, isn't there? I mean, he's such a good player. I mean, when Sergio Busquets came in, people said like the main advantage and reason why he was a great signing was all those years with Barcelona. Nobody knows better where Messi is on the field without looking than Sergio Busquets, to pick him out with the pass, to know what kind of moves he's about to make, to read his mind, to have that intuition between players. And we saw that right from the outset, didn't we, in that first Leagues Cup campaign where Busquets was just finding Messi all the time. And that has started to happen less and less, I think. But if there's another player who can do that kind of thing, who has that kind of understanding in the world, the only other person who probably has that is Rodrigo De Paul, who's been doing it for Argentina, together with maybe Angel Di Maria, who was also
Right.
heavily linked with a move to Inter Miami some months ago. And he would be an extraordinary signing, I think, really, because, people still like to poke fun at MLS about it being a retirement league and so on. And we're starting to see younger players come in closer to the prime. 31 these days, with the level of fitness that players keep, is not old at all. He's a top player in the Champions League. He's been a top player during the qualification campaign for the World Cup. He would be an outstanding signing. So if Messi has said, go and get me Rodrigo De Paul and then we can talk about a new contract, you would think the two things, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, because you would think Rodrigo
Right.
De Paul's only interested in coming to Inter Miami if Messi's going to be hanging around as well.
Right. Well, that's what, people keep asking me, what do you think about, do you think Messi's going to leave? And I said, the fact that Jorge Mas is in Madrid trying to bring him Rodrigo De Paul, that says to me, he's staying. He just, he would like some more strong players. And especially if Luis Suarez is going to leave, he likes to have a really close friend and confidant on the team. And this would be Rodrigo De Paul on the field and off the field. Like you said, the chemistry they have, it's almost like ESP on the field, that they have telepathy. And he is sort of a bodyguard. He acts like a bit of an enforcer bodyguard type for Messi. And so going into an important season for MLS next year in the new stadium, and Argentina going into the World Cup, it does seem to make quite a bit of sense.
It does, yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out within the roster restrictions and the salary cap and so on.
DPs and all that. Some DP would have to leave because he would be a designated player. Obviously, his salary would be very big. Also, what I'm hearing is that Atletico Madrid wants a 15 15 million euros, so like $17 million transfer fee. Inter Miami has the money; they can do that. In fact, they just got 21 million more for their Club World Cup, so they have money. That's not an issue. As far as the salary restrictions, though, he would be a DP, so there would have to be a DP that leaves, and Sergio Busquets is a DP. Luis Suarez is not a DP, so there would have to do some kind of shifting. There would have to be some kind of creative financing for him to come in as a designated player. Let's
Yeah,
hear
and
what. Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, is your feeling that this is a deal that would happen this summer, or that they're talking about this one being in the winter for next year?
I think both options are a possibility. It is possible that he could just break the contract and come now and give him a push for the end of the year, and or it could be in the winter window and then he's available for the start of the 2026 season. He's under contract through 26. So either way, he's going to be out of his contract with Atletico Madrid for next season, but the question is, would it be right now or would it be in the winter? I don't know. I
Mm.
asked Javier Mascherano this morning, well, Tuesday morning. You're going to be seeing this podcast on Wednesday. Tuesday morning, I asked Javier Mascherano about these talks about Rodrigo De Paul. This is what he said.
Bueno, Javier, dos preguntas. Una de Rodrigo De Paul. Yo sé que él no está aquí, pero sabemos que Jorge Mas está en Madrid tratando de hacer un negocio ahí. Que si él viene, tú lo conoces bien, ¿qué puedes decir de él como un jugador?
No, bueno, a ver, tenés mucha más información vos que yo, así que no tengo que opinar demasiado. Claramente todo el mundo conoce este tipo de jugador, pero como siempre digo, no me gusta hablar de jugadores que no, de momento no están con nosotros y no pertenecen a nuestro club. Sobre todo porque creo que sería una manera de faltarle el respeto a los que hoy en día tenemos y a los que trabajan día a día con nosotros. El día de mañana, ya sea él o cualquier otro jugador que venga, bueno, ahí ya hablaremos y te podré dar mi opinión más en profundidad.
Okay.
So basically, he said, for those who are not seeing the translations, subtitles, he said, "Oh, when I said that Jorge Mas is in Madrid trying to work out a deal," he said, "Oh, well, you know more than I do." Well, I don't know. Do you really believe that? I don't know. Maybe coach talk. He said, "You know more than I do," and then he said, "Look, I don't feel comfortable talking about players who are not on our team. I think it's, disrespectful to the players that we have on our team. He's not on our team. Obviously, everybody knows this type of player, what it would mean, this type of player." He said, if and when he or any other player signs with us, then I will be willing to, offer an in-depth opinion about this player. So he's not ready to talk about Rodrigo De Paul just yet. The MLS transfer window, by the way, opens July 24th. So if you want to mark your calendars, July 24th is when the MLS transfer window opens. But, as we see with all of these transfer news going on in Europe and in the United States, there's a lot of things that leak out before the official date. So I will be staying on top of that as much as possible. So stay tuned on that. And then with Messi's contract extension, that's another one that's a day-to-day situation. But I do wonder if some of these things are related. If he's going to, I'm not going to say hold out signing, but he may want some assurances before he puts his signature on the paper. So we're going to be on top of what's happening with Messi. They obviously want Messi to come back. He wants to come back. He's very happy here. He's happy here. His family is here. The World Cup is here in the United States next year. He wants to play in the World Cup. It really would not make sense. Do you agree? It would not make sense for him to pick up everything and leave right now.
No, I think, as long as he's happy here. I mean, I do wonder how much of this sort of push for Rodrigo De Paul might be connected to the Club World Cup, though, where it was a real sort of reminder to Messi of what's missing. Yeah, I mean, for all the credit that can be given, I know we'll talk about that later, but to the way the team performed, he will miss having players of the quality of Rodrigo De Paul around him. So, that kind of, it does make sense what you're saying. And I think, if he wants to have a year building up to the World Cup in MLS, he can manage himself much better in MLS than he can if he went back to Europe or if he went somewhere else. So, barring some unexpected, mega incredible offer from somewhere else in the world like Saudi Arabia or something, I don't see why he would want to move 1 year out from the World Cup. He's got that stability and that comfort level, which he was craving when he came here. I mean, that was the reason why he came here. He said, I want to be able to live a more normal life. And he does.
He goes and watches his kids play youth soccer with his wife. They're sitting there with the other soccer parents. He can drive his kids to school. Of course, people still recognize him. And when the team travels, everyone goes crazy and they need a barricade around the hotel. But in his day-to-day life, it's much more normal than it is when he's in Argentina or when he's in Europe. Yeah. So it makes sense. I think it makes sense that he's going to stay. They're just working out details. And yes, I think he may want some assurances that there is going to be some elite talent because like you said, we could see the gap in that PSG game. They played very well, no question. They got through the group phase. PSG is PSG. They're very, very good. They're, arguably the best club team in the world. But he wants good players around him. He gets frustrated if there aren't good players around him because it affects the way he plays. So I'm sure that he would love to have Rodrigo De Paul next to him.
Oh, absolutely. I think if Jorge Mas was going to him and having a hypothetical conversation about, hey, what can I bring you? What can I bring you for ahead of 2026? I would think Rodrigo De Paul would probably be top of that list. I really do.
Yes.
I
agree.
More than another striker, more than another winger, that kind of player who takes control of the game in midfield and can then provide the service to Messi. That's what he wants. He wants good service. He doesn't want a pass that's half a yard behind him. He wants one that's in his stride. So, that's absolutely fundamental to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, speaking of Messi, and he still can do amazing things. At his age, he really is a one of a kind type of player. What he did at the Montreal game, I wondered, to be honest, how motivated is he going to be? How motivated is this team going to be coming off games where they're playing in front of 60 and 65,000 people against really big, well-known clubs around the world? And then they were coming back to not only MLS, talk about, going back to reality, but going back to play the last place team in MLS. And I really wondered whether there would be a lack of concentration, a lack of passion or energy. And you know what? At the beginning, he actually made a very rare mistake. He made an errant pass, or I don't know. I think someone was supposed to be there who was not there. Obviously, it was something Messi doesn't usually do. A back pass right into the path of a Montreal player, and they score an early goal, and you're thinking, uh-oh. But then, no. He played really well the rest of the game, ends up with 2 goals, dribbled through 4 or 5 defenders, scores his trademark type of goal in tight spaces, and then also gets an assist. Allende scores, Segovia scores, and they come out with a 4-1 victory on the road, which they really needed. They got 3 points, and they still have some climbing to do. They are in 6th place. They were in 7th last week. They've gone up to 6, but they do have 4 games in hand. I have to keep reminding, when you look at the standings, look at how many games they have played, 17. The other teams, all the teams ahead of them have played 21. So they have 4 games in hand. They still have plenty of time to make up. But they've got a tough, they've got a tough road ahead. But first of all, the Montreal game I thought was really important for them to come back to MLS with energy. And let's see what Javier Allende, who scored one of the goals, said about the game.
Como vos dijiste, un gran trabajo, una gran actuación del equipo en sí. Y bueno, de acuerdo a mi gol estoy muy contento de poder haber sumado y que sea uno más.
Jugar un segundo tiempo con energía, con una remontada, entre equipos que hablaron en medio tiempo.
Sí, la verdad que el segundo tiempo fue mucho mejor que el primero. Corregimos muchas cosas que veníamos padeciendo en el primero y bueno, eso nos llevó al triunfo.
Y la última, viene un mes lleno de partidos que esperan eso.
Bueno, hay que recuperarse ahora, descansar bien, va a ser fundamental para poder afrontar los partidos de la mejor manera y estar concentrados y como lo venimos haciendo. Gracias.
¿Cómo se sintió meter el gol?
¿Cómo se sintió meter el gol? Fue un descargo ahí que lo grité con bronca porque me quedé porque había perdido una antes y fue muy clara. Y bueno, poder haber revertido la situación rápido fue lo mejor.
Okay, so to summarize what Dario Allende said, he said he was very happy scoring the goal. He mentioned later that he screamed so loud that he was so happy to score that goal because he had missed an early chance, an easy chance earlier in the game. And that was frustrating. And then, so when he scored, he was extremely happy about that. He said, the second half was better than the first. And then he said, now they have a very heavy schedule coming up and they have to stay focused and they have to, continue on with what they're doing. And, a big key to that obviously is Messi. And it remains to be seen, for example, is he going to play on Wednesday night at New England, or is this a game where he takes a rest? I asked Javier Mascherano about that actually before training on Tuesday, and he was a little bit wishy-washy this time. He did not say that Leo is definitely playing. He says, when Leo is healthy and he loves to play, he wants to play, he's happiest on the field, all of that. But he did say we have to definitely start managing minutes. It's going to depend how players feel. We have a lot of games coming up. By the way, after this game, they have Nashville at home, which is in second place, and that's on Saturday. So I could see a situation where Luis Suarez rests. Maybe Messi doesn't play the full game. But anyway, so far, what I had asked Mascherano after the Montreal game is, did it surprise you the passion with which he played, considering who he is and that they were coming off the Club World Cup? Here's what he said about Messi.
Bueno, buenas noches. No, bueno, en general creo que hicimos un gran partido. Nunca es fácil volver a insertarse en la competición después del mes que estuvimos compitiendo en el Mundial de Clubes, y creo que los jugadores lo han hecho a la perfección, es decir, volver a meter la cabeza en la MLS y sobre todo se nos presentó un partido complicado con el resultado adverso al comienzo del partido y que bueno, el equipo lo tuvo que trabajar para dar vuelta al resultado, lo hizo muy bien, en la misma línea que creo yo estuvimos durante todo el Mundial de Clubes, así que la verdad que una gran noche, nos llevamos los 3 puntos a Miami que eran muy necesarios para volver a empezar a pensar en la MLS. Bueno, al final, más allá de la última derrota, que es verdad, pero bueno, también el rival juega. Sí, creo que básicamente el equipo ya hace unos cuantos partidos que viene en una buena línea. Los últimos partidos en la MLS, tanto con Filadelfia como con Montreal y Columbus, antes de jugar el Mundial de Clubes veníamos en una muy buena línea, lo pudimos mantener en el Mundial de Clubes y era muy importante para nosotros volver a la competencia y hacerlo dando la misma imagen, ¿no? Es decir, ser intensos, estar juntos, defender bien y sobre todo a la hora de atacar, no desesperarnos y tener paciencia. Ahora se nos vienen muchos partidos consecutivos en pocos días, vamos a necesitar de todo el plantel, de todos los jugadores y al que le toque que esté preparado, ¿no? Al final de eso se trata. Pero bueno, vuelvo a repetir, era un partido muy importante, sobre todo también por el momento de Montreal. Montreal venía en un buen momento y bueno, creo que más allá de cómo se dio el partido, el equipo estuvo a la altura, hizo un gran partido y fue merecedor de la victoria.
He actually did not talk about Messi yet there. He was talking about, in general, how the team played. And after this, he's going to tell us about Messi. But he said that, overall, that the team had actually been in a good run of form, even before the Club World Cup at the very end. They played well against Philadelphia. They beat Columbus. So going into the Club World Cup, the team had already had a little bit of a turnaround. Then he felt that they played well. during the Club World Cup. They had a very good performance. Of course, the PSG game, he said, the loss is the other team obviously plays. But he said that it was very important to come into this Montreal game, come back into MLS, and continue to have success and stay in the same form that they were in. And that now, again, they keep repeating that they have a very heavy schedule coming up. And, they have so many games right now coming up in a row. They have Wednesday at New England Wednesday, Saturday at home against Nashville, at Cincinnati next Wednesday, at New York Red Bulls next Saturday, then home against Cincinnati. So it's 5 games in 18 days. 3 of the first 4 are on the road, and they're against league opponents that are, either ahead of them or just one spot behind them in the playoffs. So it's a tough time. He said everybody's going to have to step up. And now he's going to tell us about Lionel Messi. Go ahead.
Ok, buenos días. No, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Yes. Sí, ok. Javier, si puedes hablar de... Yo sé que habla mucho de Leo y hay muchas preguntas siempre de Leo, pero si puedes hablar de... Alguna gente creían que él iba a descansar después de la Copa, que no iba a jugar esta noche, no sabíamos, pero no solo jugó con mucha pasión. Y puedes hablar de la actuación de él regresando de la Copa para tener este tipo de partido esta noche.
Bueno,
gracias. ¿Qué dice de él? Ajá.
Buenas noches, Michelle. Bueno, primero, todavía no crees cuando yo hablo, porque ayer en la conferencia te dije que si estaba todo bien iba a viajar y iba a jugar, pero bueno, se ve que no soy creíble. Más allá de eso, tenemos que entender que Leo es feliz jugando al fútbol, y cada vez que está en condiciones de jugar, va a jugar porque él es feliz dentro de un campo de juego. Claramente nosotros contamos con un plus cuando juega él, con una ventaja, y esa ventaja la queremos utilizar la mayor cantidad de tiempo y en la mayor cantidad de partidos. El resto ya vivo hablando de él, claramente es alguien diferente, un jugador diferente que tenemos la suerte de tenerlo nosotros, de que juegue para nosotros, y bueno, hoy ha hecho la diferencia nuevamente.
Gracias.
You might have just been asked about it in Spanish, but what did you make of Leo's second goal? I know you've seen these types of goals up close many times, but
Yeah.
does it still amaze you when you see something like that?
I'm still enjoy to watch him playing. As a coach, for me, it's a privilege to coaching him. When I say coaching him, it's a way to say that I'm the coach, because normally no one can coach Messi. Messi play, and you have to watch him. So yes, I was very lucky as a teammate to watch too many games and too many goals that he scored today.
So basically he said, first of all, he said, he joked and he said, believe me, I'm not very credible, because I told you that when he's fit, he's going to play, because he loves to play. He said he's happiest when he's on the field and he loves to play. He also talked about that, that he gives the team such an advantage, and they want to use that advantage every single chance they can. And then in English, you heard what he said in English. Simon, before we go on to Club World Cup, I want to ask you, as someone who has watched so much soccer, you've covered soccer in Europe at the highest levels, does Messi still amaze you with what he's doing at 38 years old? And how is he different now from when you would see him play in Europe in his younger years?
Well, he still does amaze me, yeah, because every now and then he'll do something which only he can do, really. I mean, the game against Al Ahly, which wasn't a great game from Messi or anything like that, but near the end he gets a ball from a short corner and tries to put it in the top corner, and the goalkeeper makes an amazing save. There's very few players in the world of any age, or any level of experience, would take a short corner and look for the top corner. And he can do that because he has a level of manipulation of the ball with his left foot that very, very few players have ever had. So yes, you still do get surprised by him. The dribble for the goal, the second goal against Montreal, you know, I see a lot of people on social media complaining about the defending. You know, it's very, very difficult when you're trying also not to give away a free kick right outside the box, because we know when it comes to free kicks, he scores them like penalty kicks for other players. So, you know, there's so many factors in a defender's mind when they're up against Messi, trying not to give away a free kick or a penalty, and then he punishes you. How is he different from when he was at his peak in Europe? I mean, the pace isn't quite the same. I wouldn't say he's slow now, but he did used to have that ability to just put a little shuffle in and then leave somebody behind. But we saw again against Montreal, he's no slouch. He's still pretty fast at 38. But that does take away some elements of his game. And I think he's become, we see with Argentina as well, he plays a lot deeper. He comes a lot deeper. He spends more time scanning the field and looking for those openings than he used to do when he was younger. But that's been a trademark part of his game for quite a while now. He's still Messi. You're still getting to watch Messi when you go and see him. What you haven't got around him that he had in Europe is like a really top team like Barcelona had. But absolutely, he's still Messi. He can still do it. And it's not at all beyond the realms of possibility that he does it all again at the World Cup with Argentina. He's well capable. Maybe he doesn't play 90 minutes as much. Maybe the taboo of not substituting Messi, you know, gets dropped by Argentina. It kind of already has in a way, I think. So it will be different, and they have to put different pieces around him, but absolutely he's still very, very close to the top.
Absolutely. He's still Messi. Messi is still Messi. I want to shift back to Club World Cup, which is still going on. You know, the four teams that were left for the semis: Chelsea, Fluminense, PSG, Real Madrid. Coming into the tournament, especially from Europe, and you know, because you work for a global agency, you know, I think the South American teams and fans were really taking this seriously. I can even know from the local South American media and Central American media were very hyped up and asking a lot of questions about it in the months leading in. This was being taken very seriously, the Club World Cup. Seems to me that in Europe, you know, there was a lot of skepticism about the tournament. It's just a FIFA money grab. Who's going to go? Maybe they're going to cancel it. I mean, I remember back in the winter before they had the draw, there was some talk about they're not even going to hold this tournament. This is never going to even happen. I just want your perspective again, someone who a more global look. What do you think the impression of this tournament was before and now during?
So I think it's been a success. I think FIFA would view it as a success. I think it's, look, you know, people are going to point at the attendances and talk about the empty seats and so on. It's been averaging crowds around 35, 40,000 for most of the tournament, group stage and knockout, and it's taking place in NFL stadiums, so you're going to have some empty seats. But you put these games anywhere in Europe, a lot of those games you would struggle to get 35,000 for. If you pop Mamelodi Sundowns against Ulsan in Hamburg, Germany, you are not going to get a big crowd for that game. So people have to be realistic about some of it. I think it hasn't caught the imagination of fans in Europe, and part of that was the negative media coverage beforehand, which was very, very critical of the whole idea and saw it as a money grab and saw it as yet another addition to the calendar, which of course it is. But also the time difference, right? I mean, you will stay up and we will see this next year, that if you're from England and the England national team are playing in the middle of the night in European time, which they'll try and fix the scheduling so they don't, but if they are, because of weather and other factors, people will stay up and watch those games at 3 a.m. Are you going to do that if Chelsea are playing or Manchester City are playing? If you're a Chelsea or a Man City fan, maybe. If you're a fan of another team, you're not staying up to 3 a.m. to watch another club. So that's been a factor. But the South Americans have totally saved this tournament. The fans.
Oh, it's been amazing. The fans, the Boca, all of the Brazilian fans and the Argentine fans were just amazing. The atmosphere, and by the way, Hard Rock Stadium averaged 61,000 for their games. They only
We were
had one
lucky.
game that
We
was
were
under
lucky,
20.
Michelle. Really, I think
We were lucky to be in Miami. Yeah.
I talked to a photographer colleague who did all the games in Cincinnati. It wasn't the same experience we were getting in Miami. Let's put it that way. So the Boca Juniors fans were incredible, more incredible than their team, to be honest. But the same also, with good showings from some of the Mexican teams. And then the North African clubs, Al Ali, that opening game.
They had a huge crowd. There were so many Egyptian fans. Yes.
Incredible.
So many Al Ali fans. Yeah.
And we saw that
Yeah,
with
so in
Esperance from Tunisia as well. So, the North African impact on the tournament was significant as well. But I think it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's here to stay as well. I can't see FIFA saying that this was, the problems were so bad that they're not going to do it again. On the contrary, I think the positives will be so strong that they will definitely do it again in 4 years' time.
Yeah, I do think that too. I think it could end up. Do you think it would end up in the United States again in 4 years? It could. Or do you think it'll go elsewhere?
It could. I know that Brazil have formally said they're interested in hosting it. Spain have had conversations with FIFA about could they do it, a year out from their World Cup that they're co-hosting with Portugal and Morocco. But the big advantage to having it in the States is the diaspora communities here, what we've just been talking about. There's nowhere else in the world where you can go, and there will be tens and tens of thousands of South Americans living within travel distance of the stadium. I mean, that's just something.
Yeah, they're not necessarily people who flew here. They are Argentines who live here, Brazilians who live here, who could just drive to these games. Yeah,
I think there were a lot of Boca Juniors fans flew in for the games, but I think maybe the River Plate fans were more American based, and certainly the North African ones we're talking about and the Brazilian ones. We forget so often how enormous this country is and how big some of the cities and communities are. And you look at somewhere like Orlando, and no one was surprised there were big crowds for Brazilian teams in Orlando because there's a huge Brazilian community there.
Huge Brazilian community. They work in all the theme parks. There's a huge population of Brazilians who have settled in Orlando. Outside of South Florida, Orlando is one of the biggest communities of Brazilians.
Yeah. So it's a reminder of things that we either know or should have known about this country and the soccer fan base in this country in all its amazing diversity. No other country can match that. So while they're still establishing the tournament, it wouldn't surprise me if there's some voices in FIFA saying, Brazil sounds great. We could have a great tournament in Brazil, and in some ways that would make it appear more authentic. But in terms of rooting the tournament and establishing it with a second edition that's strong and has a buzz around it, they could well be tempted to come back here again.
Yeah, let's look at this video, which I don't know why this video was so exciting for fans, but I posted this on Instagram just as a sort of little one-off video, and it's gotten like 250,000 views. So here it is. Here's this video that fans around the world seem very excited about.
Let's see. Opa! So this is what the 32 teams are playing for. And it's not, yeah, here it is. As you know, there is a key, because it's a very special and unique trophy, and this key is magic. So, I put the mic. Does work. The mic. Yeah, this is the FIFA Club World Cup trophy.
People love that video. I don't know if people just haven't seen the trophy and that little magic key in the back that turns it from a flat cup into a three-dimensional trophy. But, I think you were there, Simon. It was that little press conference we had in Coral Gables. And I just posted that little video, and people are very excited about the look of that trophy, or Gianni Infantino in the trophy. I'm not sure. But there it is. The Club World Cup trophy, the $1 billion tournament. The winning team stands to make as much as $125 million, depending on what they did in the first round. So here it is, and we'll see what the future is. I wanted to wrap up, Simon, with you touched on a little at the beginning about your sport business podcast and newsletter. Going into the World Cup year next year, what are, if you had to say two or three, or even MLS right now, what are two or three of the biggest stories in soccer business right now? Would you say two or three stories that are really big right now in soccer in the United States?
Yeah, so on the MLS front, I think there's a lot of people curious to see whether they use the momentum of the World Cup to transition into that new season structure, playing on the European calendar. And I think if they can do that with the challenges that brings in the colder markets in the north, I think if they can do that, it opens up a lot more possibilities for MLS. I think it clears that summer, so we don't have the frankly crazy situation of MLS going on during the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup and everything else, trying to compete with those things. I think it moves it away from the NFL playoffs, and in, well, not the playoffs, but the NFL when MLS is in its playoffs in November, December, and college football as well, and puts it into a more easier, I think, time space where MLS would have its playoffs in the spring. So that's a big story. I think it opens up things on the transfer market as well. That's one to watch out for, because the ownership of the MLS clubs, from what I understand, there's a little bit of a division there about whether it's the right thing to do. But a lot of people
I want to ask you one more thing about, is there also a division? It seems to me, is there a division? It seems to me that there are two camps in the MLS ownership. There are the owners who want to just loosen the rules a lot and open up the checkbooks. And then there are other ones that are more conservative and like this sort of single entity thing where there's a lot of parity in the league. Do you think that that's true?
I think that's a fundamental question for the future of MLS after the Club World Cup, because we saw three teams there. We saw Inter Miami, the only one that got out of its group, and LAFC and Seattle Sounders did creditably, I have to say. I think especially the Sounders, I think they put up a decent performance against Botafogo and so on, did better than a lot of people would expect. But clearly you come out of that Club World Cup and you look at MLS clubs and you think, if you want to compete with these sort of teams, and not even talking about competing with PSG, but if you're talking about being able to compete and beat teams on a Salzburg, Porto sort of level in Europe, or the South American giants and so on, you need to be spending more money. And one of the things we've been looking at, one of the things we want to do with the soccer business, myself and Paul, who's my co-founder in it, is to try and go a little bit deeper into like some of the data that exists out there publicly that you can get and manipulate. So we did something, and we haven't published it yet, but to look at how much more would MLS have to spend to be competitive with, say, the French league on average. You know, and you're looking at teams having to spend 3 or 4 times more to be competitive with a Strasbourg.
With the French league, right? We're not even talking about EPL or La Liga.
Once
We're
you
talking
get
about
to EPL and La Liga, you're looking at even double that. So, you know, when people say they need to open up the purse strings and spend more, I totally agree, and I'd love to see that happen. But we are talking about a massive shift for MLS if they go down that path. And if they continue with the more gradual approach, which has always been MLS's preference, then it's going to take time for them to get to those levels. And the key thing that connects the sort of business and the performance side of it is to qualify for the next Club World Cup. We don't know if there's going to be a host nation slot that Inter Miami got this time. There's going to be 4 teams from CONCACAF. One of those places is already taken. Cruz Azul won the CONCACAF Champions Cup. There's 3 spots available. They're all going to the winner of that CONCACAF Champions Cup. And MLS has got to be able to win those tournaments to get in it. Otherwise, it risks not even being in the Club World Cup. So, you know, you would think they'd find a way for at least one team, but MLS needs to be competitive with Liga MX as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They're sort of at an interesting point in their inflection point in the future of soccer here from the professional standpoint in MLS, and that's why I encourage everyone to follow Simon and all his work with the sports business, because it really is interesting. I mean, a lot of people are covering the games and all that, but there's a lot of interesting business stories to be had also. So anyway, I want to thank Simon, for joining us. You're always a fabulous guest, always fascinating, so much good insight. We're going to be watching, obviously, Inter Miami will be playing Wednesday night at New England. We'll see if Messi plays or not, or Suarez. Then Saturday at home against Nashville, I expect a full roster for that one. That's a really big game. Then Wednesday at Cincinnati, another huge game. Then the next Saturday at New York Red Bulls, and then back home July 26th at home against Cincinnati. And then, oh yes, Leagues Cup.
Hey.
Let's not forget the Leagues Cup. 3 games against Mexican teams starting on July 30th, Atlas, Necaxa, and Pumas. So there's so many games coming up over the next month. Buckle your seatbelts, everybody. And thank you so much for following the show. We really appreciate. You can see us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you get your, or to go to MiamiHerald.com. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Simon, and we will see you next week.